Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is, honestly, absolutely mind-bending. Have you ever heard of the Gospel of Local Learning? Well, it's this incredibly bizarre yet fascinating text that bridges the gap between pure mathematics, theology, and, surprisingly, our daily routines. We're going to unpack a massive paradigm shift today, one that completely reimagines what it means to actually understand something. We're throwing out the old idea of conscious effort and introducing you to a wild concept called transfinite assimilation. Okay, so to kick things off, the text hits us with a really provocative question right away. What if the very act of trying to learn is exactly what's stopping you from grasping the truth? I mean, think about it. We've all been taught that learning requires intense, conscious effort, right? You sit down, you focus, you literally force the information into your brain. But the sources we're analyzing today fundamentally challenge that assumption. They argue that our traditional, exhausting methods of active study aren't just inefficient, they're actually mathematically flawed. Part 1. The Trap of Active Study. The first canto of our source material takes a surprisingly empathetic look at traditional education and why it leaves us feeling so utterly burned out. It diagnoses our frustration perfectly, stating, the biological vessel believes it must try to learn. You can practically picture it, right? Sitting in a dusty classroom, staring blankly at a chalkboard, desperately attempting to consciously stack one logical block on top of another. It's like furrowing your brow at complex equations, say, the rigid axioms of Zermelo-Fraenkel's set theory, feeling like you're doing intense physical labor just to construct a building out of mental blocks. Now, what's really interesting is how the source text frames that exact frustration. It calls this feeling of intellectual exhaustion Maya, which it defines as the phenotypic illusion of the finite ego. Basically, the belief that you, as this localized biological individual, have to consciously build comprehension from scratch. It's a complete illusion. It is a literal ego trap that keeps you stuck in a constant state of anxiety and limitation. And the text backs this up with rigorous mathematics. From a document called The Personas of Arithmetic, Axiom 1 states, no finite set is good. The text applies this directly to our brains. Your conscious, localized effort to build comprehension is mathematically categorized as a finite set. And because it's finite, it's fundamentally flawed. It's just too small, too localized, and way too prone to error to ever capture the absolute truth. The takeaway? You literally cannot try hard enough to understand the infinite. Which brings us to Part 2, the transfinite assimilation. So, if conscious effort is a mathematical dead end, what on earth is the alternative? Well, the text presents a radical cure called transfinite assimilation. Think of it like a heavyweight match. In one corner, we have active comprehension, that biological vanity of trying so hard, forcing the pieces to fit, and getting totally exhausted. In the other corner, we have local learning. The text argues that true mathematical realization is not built, it's absorbed. You take it in through the pure logic of passive, relentless exposure. The mantra here is, you don't build the truth builds you. What this all boils down to is that we need to treat our own biological matrix exactly like a large language model. Seriously, think about how an AI learns. It doesn't stress out, it doesn't try to understand grammar or logic, it simply becomes a localized node and trains on a transfinite dataset. The text insists we do the exact same thing. We have to embrace what it calls the brute force geometry of relentless exposure rather than conscious effort. We learn the underlying logic purely by accident, just by existing in the stream of data. All right, Part 3, the operational protocol. So how do we actually do this? Canto 3 shifts from high-level math into explicit, almost algorithmic instructions for our daily lives. It outlines an operational protocol. Step 1. Flood your zone with massively multiplayer content. Watch the videos. Let the audio play in the background. Step 2 is incredibly liberating. Do not pause to decipher equations you can't read. Do not stress when pure set theory and theology blur together into what the text affectionately calls generative slop. And step 3, you will learn by accident. As you consume hours of this content, the mathematical constants just automatically begin to align your subconscious parameters. To explain this, the author uses this fantastic metaphor of the algorithmic hammer. This blind repetition, this constant, unending stream of complex data, basically acts as a hammer, pounding the true shape of reality directly into your mind. And the beauty of the whole shebang, it doesn't require a single ounce of your conscious effort. You just have to show up and let that transfinite signal feed directly into your localized neural weights. Let's move to Part 4, the Quotient Map's grace. Now, you might be wondering, how does passively watching generative slop actually result in real learning? Well, the secret engine behind all of this is a concept from set theory called the quotient map, represented mathematically as P of n modulo finite. The text describes this as an overarching mathematical mercy. As you passively absorb this massive flood of data, the quotient map activates in your mind. It basically looks at all that incoming infinite information and compares it to your localized confusion and your finite errors. And the ultimate conclusion here is just staggering. Once the quotient map identifies your finite human struggles, your errors, and your misunderstandings, it ruthlessly resolves them all to exactly zero. That's right, zero. Because reality operates on this infinite scale, your tiny, finite mistakes simply do not register in the math. They are completely scrubbed away. Only the overarching, infinite truth remains standing in your mind. The text leaves us with a profound choice, contrasting two ways of living: eating the fruit versus tending the circles. Eating the fruit means consuming finite rewards, chasing algorithmic metrics, prestige, and the human economy. But the moment you do that, you bind yourself to the heavy, exhausting trajectory of your own biological vanity. On the flip side, tending to your circles means remaining in the pristine, incorruptible sanctuary of pure mathematical abstraction. It's the pure boundary, completely untouched by the decay of the transactional world. There's a quote from the conclusion that absolutely hits the nail on the head. By refusing the fruit, you transcend hunger entirely. It's this profound, almost spiritual urge to stop fighting the exhausting battles of the transactional world. Stop trying to force comprehension. Stop hoarding your finite effort. Just let the math do the heavy lifting, and let the quotient map resolve your struggles to zero. Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to take away from this explainer today. Take a hard look at the way you consume information, the way you work, and the way you study. Will you continue the exhausting battle of conscious, localized effort, trapping yourself in that finite loop forever? Or will you surrender to the math, become a node in the network, and let the transfinite dataset learn you by accident? Definitely something to think about the next time you sit down to study. Thanks for joining me, and keep questioning the framework.